An interesting thing that we didn't talk about is Similani and his exclusion from the Bok alignment camp.
They've only won 5 of their 12 games with 1 draw and their 6 losses. So they've lost more than they've won.
Particularly after seeing the table now, I can also understand Dobson's words a couple weeks ago saying,
you have to pick one team that you think is going to drop, and you're going to pick one team from the remaining 8 that you think will get into the playoffs.
I think there's definitely a line where the conditions just become farcical.
Bench opinions. 3 idiots with amateur analysis.
Welcome to Rugby for this week. There's only 2 of us again. Some would say it's because 3 of us in a room is just too much sex appeal. But to be honest, it's all it really actually is just bad planning. So that's sorry to paint it on honestly for you people. But
do you think anybody's ever said that?
Listen, no one's not said it. No one's denied it at this stage yet. Proactively denied it. So I'm going to go with that being a possibility in the realm. But self-love is never a bad thing, but not too much. Anyway, welcome to Rugby. This is, as of the last couple of weeks, we've split our long podcast into different segments. And if you're into rugby, you can listen to this. If you're not into rugby, you can still listen to it. It's beautiful. You can choose. Or you could listen to What a Week, which came out yesterday, where we talk about everything other than sport.
What did we talk about this week? We talked about painting your apartment.
Organic supermarkets.
And the pain that people go through for fashion.
There you go. Beauty is pain. There you go. And yeah, that probably explains why I'm in so much pain so often.
Because you're a beautiful man. What's that quote
what
from?
A beautiful chocolate
what a beautiful chocolate man.
I'm not a chocolate man, but I'm a man and I am beautiful. So
white chocolate.
Let's move on because I'm too much self-love in this first couple of seconds here. This is the rugby segment. We're going to talk about everything to do with rugby. And this is a good time to click like and subscribe and send it to your uncle who also likes rugby or maybe wants to learn a bit more about rugby.
Or maybe he likes football. Oui, Dominic. Unbelievable.
They got those coasters that stick to the bottom of glasses. Unbelievable.
Classic. Yeah. So, sorry, just a bit of fucking cleaning up here.
I'm definitely going to do it again later in this podcast. Anyway, only rugby really this week was URC.
Yeah, we had a bye in the Six Nations.
Six Nations bye week. A lot of byes for such a short competition.
Generally, I think the way that the rugby season is set up, or the year scheduling is set up, is a complete disaster because you don't have like properly defined international breaks. You don't have properly defined like competitions. So, I mean, the worst competition to follow for me personally is the Rugby Championship because it's like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 1 week on, 3 weeks off. I'm never quite sure which competition we're watching, but there's rugby on every weekend.
Yeah, this is true. With the game becoming a bit more international, and more leagues popping up, maybe eventually we move to something like football where you have international breaks. Rest of the season is just, and because let's be honest, the whole season, it runs through all seasons now. Like you might as well play rugby in June in England as well. Who cares? You know. Yeah. And then you have major tournaments over the summer, like they do in football. Anyway, digress. URC happened. I don't know if you want to talk us very briefly before we get to our sort of feature match, which is Lions against Sharks. Very briefly through a couple of the results. Anything that springs to mind? Anything that sort of you think could be interesting?
Well, Edinburgh for me had a bit of a surprise win against Munster. I didn't see that happening. Edinburgh has not really been showing much form in the last couple of weeks, and they went out to Munster. Where are they playing Munster?
Munster is down. It's in Cork, I think.
Is it in Cork? Anyway, they went down there and happened to beat them 28-34 for Edinburgh. So well done to them for that. A big win for Zebra at home against the Dragons. Kind of to be expected, that one. The Lions and the Sharks will get to. Leinster quite comfortably beating Cardiff at home 42-24. I'll get to the other South African games later as well. Ulster and Scarlets, that one was way closer than I thought it was going to be. Ulster at home just winning by 2 points, 30-28. The Scarlets really pushing Ulster. And then you had Glasgow, which is probably the most bizarre result of the week, losing to the Ospreys, 31-32, a very tight game, but Glasgow at home losing, which blows my mind.
A lot of action happening towards the end of games as well, because I know that Edinburgh were way further ahead against Munster. They were absolutely destroying Munster early on. Munster almost clawed back to get a result. And also like the Benetton game as well. Benetton ahead for long periods of that game and ended up losing out to Connacht. So the unpredictability sort of continues. And then obviously, as you said, Ospreys, Glasgow result. Again, you just can't really pick how these teams are going to perform, particularly in the context of their top players being away at the Six Nations. So yeah, let's get into Lions against the Sharks. 38-14 win for the Lions, which is a surprise result. I think that's fair to say.
I would also say I mean, you and I are both Lions supporters, so obviously we want the Lions to win. But I don't think either of us. Did you predict the Lions to win?
No,
you also predicted the Sharks. I mean, the Sharks is just a box laden team. You would expect them to win. They've got not only the box, but the talent that they've purchased coming through the ranks is also very, very strong. And the Lions have got a couple of injuries currently, and they don't have depth squad to cover those positions. But the way that they came out firing in Johannesburg, unreal. I mean, they scored 3 tries within a couple of minutes, I think in the first 20 minutes or something like that, all converted by Gianni Lombard. And I think
he had a great game here.
He had a great game. He really did. But I think the scoreboard pressure just eventually got to the Sharks. They couldn't, start kicking for penalties. They had to go for tries. They couldn't get anything on the board.
Some ill discipline as well. I know Lorenzo Julius got sent off. Got a yellow card at some
Truno
point.
Also got a yellow card.
Yeah, Truno as well. That was also cynical. Yeah. 2 young players though, I think, and it's probably them just trying to get the ball over the gain line or try and make a difference. I double checked Julius's age, and he's only 20 years old, which is insane because you look at him and you're like, this guy's a father of 4.
I remember we had this conversation, I think 2 weeks ago, we were talking about it, and so not last year, because last year was 2024, but the year before that, he played for the Baby Box. Yeah, wow. So he's still got a long career ahead of him.
Some talent there, yeah. Also, we'll get to the table now, but also such a vital win for the Lions, and from that perspective, probably a surprise. It's like almost feels like a bonus points, like a bonus 4 points there, or 5 points would have been.
Bonus point,
a bonus point, bonus 5 points almost. It feels like, because you're like, oh well, on the balance of play with the Sharks playing as well as they have been in the last few weeks, and now they're knocking on the door. But before we get to the table, let's go to the next game, Bulls Stormers.
Bulls Stormers. I don't think I've seen a game that is that wet before. The game was delayed by an hour, just for context, because it had rained so severely. They had to get schoolboys out with brooms and try and sort of wipe the pitch clean. And then it was essentially a mud bath by the time they started playing. The turf obviously getting torn up at every scrum. The same could be said for the derby in Joburg, because it obviously rained there too. So scrumming conditions very difficult. Obviously the ball very slippery, so lots of mistakes in terms of handling errors. And the Stormers just, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure how they did it. Because I didn't think that they were playing that better than the Bulls were. But I don't know, rub of the green or rub of the mud in this case.
Yeah. Look, I looked at some of the reaction afterwards, and I think as soon as the Stormers, that final whistle blew, the absolute passion from the Stormers, I think they really needed that result. I think that was it. I think that was last chance saloon in very many respects for them to try and slowly work their way back up the table. Against the Bulls side also that have been on a good run of form. I mean, barring a couple of hiccups here and there throughout the season, maybe losing games that one wouldn't expect them to lose. You would expect them on the balance of play also to get it over the line. I think conditions is difficult. I think I've spoken and we've spoken about how regimented Bulls teams are under Jake White. You sometimes do wonder if sort of delayed kickoffs sort of throws out a team that maybe has really, really set pre-match routines, and just the conditions as such maybe threw a spanner in the works, leading to the Bulls maybe not being able to execute as well as they could have. But yeah, very interesting. An interesting thing that we didn't talk about when I is Similani and his exclusion from the Bok alignment camp.
Yeah.
Something at the time that I actually wanted to mention that surprised me pretty, considering if you look at the center pairings, it's still quite open. You know, he had a couple of great moments, also scoring a try in that game against the Bulls. What are we saying? Do you agree that it's a surprise omission? Do you think it's something that one should look at, or yeah? I mean, look, all being said, he's playing in a very weak Stormers team as well.
Yeah. Well, he's playing in a relatively weakened, especially due to their injuries, Stormers side. I think the competition at center, either or inside and outside, is pretty fierce now. Actually, in terms of the new talent coming through,
options.
Not as much from the guys that have been stalwarts in the team so far.
Yeah.
The likes of Jesse Creel. I was going to say Jesse Clegg, Jesse Creel, Damien Dialende, and then obviously Lukanya and Andre Esterhuizen. So when you look at the guys coming through the system, you've got your Ethan Hooker, your Julius Lorenzo, Henko van Wyk, Similane, but then you've also got guys in terms of inside center, Kanan Moody, outside center, but inside center you've got your David Creel, your Henry Pollard that they can sometimes move to inside center. You've got now I'm blanking. Inside center, you were talking.
Henko van Wyk.
No, he's outside center. You were talking about him 2 weeks ago, I think.
Oh, Creel,
David Creel.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing somebody, but there's a lot of talent coming through, and I don't know if he just didn't quite make the cut. I think he's also, I don't know if this is the correct way of saying it, but I think he's blooming a little bit late in the season. I don't think he's had a strong season the whole way through.
Yeah.
He's now really showing some form. He showed a lot of form when he was playing for the Lions a couple of years ago. So maybe it's just taken him a while to get used to the systems.
All right. Well, yeah, that we'll see. I guess how the season. It's another option to have in a position where we're a little bit unsure as to where the journey is going to go for the Springboks. But that brings us to the.
Sorry, I just wanted to say to the Stormers Bulls game. Usually, when you have a lot of rain like that, it's kind of, if you've got a very X Factor running rugby type of team like the Lions and the Stormers are, it kind of takes away their X Factor and it takes away their superpower in that regard. And you would have thought that against a really strong forward pack like what the Bulls offer, that they would really have struggled. Do you think there's like a turning point of there being too much rain that at that point even your scrum just starts to fail because the turf gets torn up?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a line where the conditions just become farcical to a certain degree. And that means you've just got an open game that's kind of devoid of any of some of the structures that you would have. Because I think scrummaging does become extremely difficult. I saw that pitch. There's no way, I think you either scrum uncontrolledly because you're slipping away, or you have to scrum within yourself because you actually can't get any footing.
Yeah.
And I do think eventually it does turn into sort of, I always use this example of The Longest Yard, that scene where the guards like spray the field overnight and it's waterlogged and they go on to like essentially play rugby, which is quite funny even though it's a football movie. Passing the ball around. I think it does turn into that. It turns into a little bit of a free fall. And if you're not good enough or dominant enough to control the game yourself through a kicking game, for example, then I think it can work in the favor of someone like the Stormers, who do prefer probably to play in a little bit more of a open, disjointed game, as opposed to the Bulls, who I think, again, Jake White teams always sort of remind me of something that's relatively well-oiled and structured. So, yeah, I think that definitely worked in their favor, which surprises me because Creel is, I think, arguably domestically anyway, one of the best kickers in the country.
David Creel,
yeah. And that's why I'm very intrigued by what Russie's plan is for him in the Springbok setup, if there is one, because he's going as an inside center, but he's, as I said, arguably one of the best kickers for poles. So you would have thought the Bulls would have, with their pack, as you said, but maybe that threshold had been crossed with in terms of conditions and being able to stick to a game plan.
Yeah, it was peculiar. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a pitch that sodden in a long time. So
yeah,
definitely interesting conditions for our teams to be playing, to get used to playing the teams up north, because obviously they're more conditioned to those kind of those kind of conditions. So good for us to sort of have that derby internally to practice. It would have been, I think, a lot more difficult had we been playing a Leinster, for example, in those conditions.
Yeah. That brings us, though, to talking to Leinster. They're top of the table, 57 points. I think we don't really have to spend too much time on them. I think that's a home semi-final nailed on. I don't see anything changing there.
Probably not. No.
12 games played, 12 wins, 9 bonus points. It's just ridiculous. And I don't think we have to get into that too much. And just crazy how there hasn't really been a dip in form. I think for them with their main Irish guys gone. So that's just another token for how good they are.
Very interesting. If you look at the points difference amongst the entire roster, they've got a points difference of plus 194. And you start looking at the other teams. The next best is Glasgow Warriors with 129. But other than that, nobody's even close to them.
Yeah. Interesting to see teams like Cardiff in 6th with a negative 58, but that just shows you that, might show a bit of game management on their part where they kind of pick games before they go into games knowing, okay, this is a team we can go to toe with. And maybe there isn't the belief there, because I think a team like Cardiff has to go through a season managing expectations, but also managing themselves and understanding, is it worth it going toe to toe with Leinster? Probably not.
Well, Cardiff is an interesting topic because they've only won 5 of their 12 games with 1 draw and their 6 losses. So they've lost more than they've won, and they've managed to keep themselves up in the table due to their bonus points. So lots of losing bonus points, 9 bonus points in total. So it just goes to show that those losing bonus points are vital.
Yeah. Glasgow in 2nd. They also have 12 bonus points. They have the most bonus points of anyone in the table. And then the 2 South African sides at the moment filling in the rest of the semi-final spots, Bulls and the Sharks.
Sharks with a game in hand. Bulls only 3 points off Glasgow on 44. So Glasgow 44, Bulls 41, and then the Sharks a little bit of a way down on 34 points. I think you can, even with the Sharks game in hand, I think you can say that those top 3 sides definitely will be in the semi-final spots. Obviously, Bulls looking to try and catch Glasgow for that home semi-final. I think for South African rugby, I think that's a minimum for us. I would say that we have at least one side in the home semi-finals every season. Sure.
And interesting to see how the Sharks finish the season, because if you were to ask me, hey, who would I like to go to Dublin to try and beat Leinster in a final, I would probably pick the Sharks over the Bulls.
Right.
Just because of the pure firepower and superstars in that team.
Okay.
Ideally, I would like a Jake White coached Sharks, but that's not going to happen. That I think would be the beauty of it, because I think I'm quite complimentary. I don't know. Jake White's become a bit old and cynical for my liking. He's a bit of an old complainer, but the Bulls, for me, just a very well coached outfit, and
for sure, yeah.
And that's cool, and good to see that Andre Pollard's coming back to them as well from next season, which is nice. But yeah, anyway, let's talk through the rest of the top 8, because we have Munster in 5th. Munster always going to be a dangerous side. I think Munster and Leinster, I think, are streaks ahead of the other 2 Irish teams. So the Irish would also look at this and thinking, wow, we should probably have 2 sides in the mix there. And the Munster pretty close to the Sharks there, albeit the Sharks have a game in hand. And if they can win that game in hand, get to 39 points in ideally, then there's quite a gulf between sort of 4th and 5th. You've got Cardiff in 6th. We've touched on them before. That I think for them is a fantastic season, 6th. And then you have Edinburgh, who seem to be catching a little bit of form and coming to a bit of form later in the season. And I love to see it. I love the city, but on a personal level. Yeah. But nice to see, and a very, very cool rugby club and very strong rugby culture. So nice to see them in there as well. And then Connacht in 8th. I do think a lot will change, particularly from sort of 6th to 8th. If you were to ask me, I guess we have now just finished game week 12, which is 2/3 through the season, 6 games left. Yeah, what are you looking at the table? What are you thinking might change? I mean, the Lions have given me a bit of hope. I don't know if it's false hope, but with that win over the Sharks, the Lions definitely, I think, have put themselves in a good enough position to pounce. They have a game in hand, so that means if they win that game anyway, they could be up somewhere around Munster. Yeah, what do you think might change? Which of those sides do you think will actually end up from Cardiff, Edinburgh, and Connacht will actually end up getting across the line?
I think the top 3, as you said, Leinster, Glasgow, and the Bulls. I think that's almost I'll put that down as a done deal. Like those 3 teams will have home semi-finals. I don't think that they are not going to finish in the top 3. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that order. I think Leinster probably will finish out the season having won everything. Maybe there's 1 or 2 losses. There's still a number of games, but they will definitely finish out the season on top of the log. Glasgow and Bulls could switch around potentially. The Sharks, they need to keep their form up to guarantee themselves that 4th spot. Munster's only 1 point behind them. Sure, the Sharks have 1 game in hand, but it's even if they get a 5-point bonus point win, that brings them up to 39. I just don't see it as... I feel that they're such a fluctuating team that they could also drop in form for a little bit. So I don't see that as a guaranteed spot. In terms of everything below that, from 5th place all the way down to, I think, like 11th or 12th, because after the Lions with 28 points, you've got Scarlets with 28, you've got Ospreys with 28, and I don't even know, you can't see the rest of the table. I don't think
Benetton and Ulster are too far off that either.
I think they're also similar, like 27, 26 points, something like that at this point in time. So a lot can still change. The Lions obviously have a game in hand. Will they win the game against the Sharks next week at the Shark Tank? I doubt it. But if they can get themselves a losing bonus point, then that puts them up in 8th position with Connacht, or tied in 8th position. Actually, we would take the lead because we have more wins. So we would be in the playoffs if the tournament were to finish, in inverted commas, at that point. And then I know that we've got some big games. I think we've got a game against Leinster. We've got a game against Glasgow. We play Cardiff in Cardiff. And then we've got a couple games at home, which are against like the Ospreys and Zebra and something like that. So there's a couple games where I think we have like guaranteed wins, but half of those are going to be extremely tough to get a win. Especially, we don't travel well, so I don't think we're going to win those. So I think there is a realistic chance of getting into the playoffs.
Okay, and then don't forget the Stormers as well. They're somewhere down there, and I don't think they're far off either. And Dobson, again, he was pretty fighting. Now with 6 games left, mathematically, easily, they could get in to those top 8s. And then I think you're looking at a South African team that's been there quite often and regularly and quite consistently over the last few years, and I think they could spring a surprise if they get into the playoffs, and
they're just starting to find some form again.
Yeah, and possibly have a couple of players returning from injury. So let's see how that gets on. Very exciting, and again, I love the unpredictability of it. I do like that. I think there's someone that kind of has gotten into it now a little bit more this season through the podcast. That's been the cool part about it. It's when I saw this table, I was like, Cardiff are 6th. How are they 6th?
Yeah.
Welsh Rugby's in tatters, and yet Cardiff are up there, and the other 2 Welsh sides also sniffing, to get into the playoffs.
The Lions, yeah.
So interesting to see. And then, Benetton, who in my mind have had a good season in terms of a couple of surprises. I think they've just been really hurt by results that they probably should have won. They definitely blow very hot and cold. Having said that, that's sort of one of the teams that I would love to see maybe sneak into that top 8.
It'll be quite interesting to see. Sorry, I'm just going to scroll down here a bit to see the rest of the table. I wanted to see what Benetton has in terms of bonus points. And so Benetton's only got 5 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw, and they've only got 6 bonus points. So that they also 28 points. So they're exactly the same as position 9 all the way to 13th. They've got the same amount of points.
Yeah. and I would say Ulster also in there with the shout. I just don't see Zebra doing enough, to be honest. But I think 14th to 9th, any of those teams could be exchanging, fighting for that 8th position. So that's great, and that's exactly. It's exactly what you want to see out of a league like the URC, to keep it interesting, to keep viewers, going. And I think if you, particularly at places like Ospreys, Scarlets, I think Ulster always have great fans. But places like Scarlets, Ospreys, Benetton, getting towards the end of the season, if they're in with a sniff, you'll see bigger crowds, you'll see interest peak. And that's what's cool about the format, I think, as well. And the fact that these teams really have a shot. I feel sorry for Dragons fans because they're just really, really bad.
They've only won one game out of 12.
Yeah.
I want to task you with a little exercise here.
Yeah.
From the teams that are in the top 8 in the playoffs currently, you have to pick one team that you think is going to drop, and you're going to pick one team from the remaining 8 that you think will get into the playoffs. From how you feel now about current form, who do you think is going to be replaced in the top 8?
Unpopular opinion, but I think Cardiff will drop out. I just don't see them having the legs. Also,
and they've lost their coach.
Yeah, and also if you look at the fact that they've got a lot of bonus points, which is kind of helping them out, and only won 5 games. I don't know if it's going to get any easier. And honestly, and this is something that is going to make Maxi very happy, I have a slight suspicion that the Stormers might turn a corner and get in there, particularly after seeing the table now. I can also understand Dobson's words a couple of weeks ago saying, we've got enough time and we've got, we think we have a road to the top 8. So that would be my shout. If it's slightly controversial, but I think that's those are two where I can see. I would think clearly. I think the Lions are in with a shout for sure. Connacht are another strange team to me. With Bandiaki in there and quite a few Irish players, and being in Galway, which with a decently sized stadium and like a little bit of a community, I would expect them to do a little bit better. But they also seem to blow really hot and cold. So ideally for me, I would obviously love the Lions to get in there as well, and I wouldn't mind seeing an Italian side in there, just for Chias, as the Afrikaners would say.
Yeah. To be honest with you, I see the DHL Stormers making it to the playoffs. I think Edinburgh is going to drop out. The same argument that you just gave for Cardiff in terms of a lot of bonus points. They themselves have got 10 bonus points and 7 losses, and I don't feel like they currently are showing good form. Yes, they just beat who did we say they just beat? Glasgow? Munster, sorry. But I just don't see them carrying it all the way to the end. And I see the Stormers picking up form and becoming really dangerous. So I think those would be my 2 teams that I would see switched by the end of the season.
Very good. Well, we will see. And as we said, a third of the season still left, which seems like a lot of rugby, which is good. It's exciting.
Was that another 6 rounds?
Another 6 rounds. And that seems like a lot of rugby. Seems like more than there should be, but
feels like this competition has been going on for ages. Yeah.
For sure. But very cool to have it all finish up. And I think interesting that conditions should get better in the Northern Hemisphere, which obviously plays into the hands of the South African teams. I think if we're playing on in a mild evening in Dublin, it suits us way better than it is playing on a cold, wet night in Dublin. So.
That being said, conditions are going to become easier for the northern teams coming down south. It's not going to be as hot. It's not going to be as humid.
Sure.
So the conditions will be balanced out, and it'll really be a head-to-head between the teams and skill and endurance.
Well, let us know in the comments who you think is who you might pick, particularly that question that Claus asked, which is an interesting one, who you would sort of, out of the top 8, who you think is going to drop down, and which of the teams that's currently outside the playoff spots would make it into the playoff spots. One last little quick topic of discussion is the Springbok coaching setup. Some big news this week.
Yeah, Felix Jones has been brought back down to the south, back down to Springbok camp. Going to take up his position as an assistant coach. Don't even know which part of the setup exactly he's going to be, but he has been part of the setup before in 2019, Obviously helped us get that win. I think back then he was also part of like conditioning.
I think he's conditioning and technical analysis, I think.
Okay, so he's taking up a similar position that he had previously.
Yeah. Technical analyst, yeah.
I mean, people have obviously seen him in Chasing the Sun.
Chasing the croissant, as I call it.
Chasing the baguette.
Yeah.
He seems like a very like charismatic, energetic, positive bloke. So I think he brings a lot of positivity to the camp. And our boys have never seemed fitter when he was around. So
and another cog in the winning wheel that's
another
returned.
Cog in the winning wheel.
So I think that's also interesting in the context of now having Brown as sort of an addition into the setup. Nice to see. And interesting.
And he spent some time in England now.
Yeah.
Before he got axed.
There you go.
So maybe he can bring back some secrets.
But also interesting to good to see that Rusty's constantly looking at, it could be easy to be rest on your laurels, but it's good to see he's always open to getting even more reinforcements in and making and increasing the chances you would think of the Springboks continuing to have a good run of things. So, yeah.
Very interesting season ahead for not only the Springboks, but also for the entire URC. I mean, when you look at the table and you've got all of those close, everybody's so close in the pecking order, it obviously makes for very entertaining rugby.
Okay, to close out the episode, I'm going to run you through the upcoming fixtures, and I want you to pick a side who you think is going to win.
Okay.
Yeah. Cardiff Lions.
Well, first we've got the Sharks Lions.
Sorry, Sharks Lions. That's on the 8th of March. Oh, okay. So that's this coming weekend. It's the only team that are playing. It's a catch-up game from week 1.
Exactly.
Sharks Lions.
Sharks.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Then we'll jump ahead to the rest, just because I think it's an interesting. We've gone through the permutations of the table. Cardiff Lions.
Lions.
Glasgow Munster.
Warriors.
Sharks Zebra.
Sharks.
Benetton Edinburgh.
Benetton.
Ooh, interesting. Bulls Leinster.
It's Bulls at home. I think this is going to be the first loss for Leinster.
Wow. Okay. Interesting shout. Scarlet Stormers.
I think the Stormers are going to beat the Scarlets.
Yeah, they're going to have to win that game.
Yeah, it's important.
Dragons Ulster.
Ulster's going to beat Dragons.
Ospreys Connacht.
Ospreys.
Ooh, yeah, that could be
that's going to be a close one.
Yeah, and that's it for that round. So let's see how those predictions hold up. Maybe we'll do another round with Maxi next week and see who gets it right. And some Six Nations returning. So lots to talk about next week.
Awesome.
Like, subscribe, listen to the other episodes. We'll see you next week.
Cheerio.